Welcome to SimpleSoftware Training University number 303, Automatic Processing with Windows Service. In this video, we will go over how to set up SimpleIndex as a Windows service to run automatic job configurations as a background process in services. So there's some different ways and reasons why you'd want to use the background process, one of which is a hot folder. With the hot folder, you could have multiple sources, such as desktop computers, digital copiers, or network scanners, all scanning to one folder and having the SimpleIndex process monitor that folder and automatically read the images and then save to the output folder. The same can apply to processor-intensive jobs, such as OCR and barcode configurations. Since those take up quite a bit of processing power and slow down your computer, you can set up a dedicated server to automatically process images that are scanned to the folder, and that way you offset the load of your processing to a different computer. Or a workstation will work as well. It doesn't have to be a server. And then another way is to have it process the images during off hours. That way you don't have to purchase an additional computer to dedicate to processing. You can use one of your existing computers and have all the processing done at night or after hours when the computer is not being used. Now you can also use SimpleIndex to process automatically as a scheduled task without having to add on the server processing. But some of the advantage to the server processing as a Windows service are, one, the users don't have to be logged into Windows for the process to keep running. That way you can log in and out of, say, a server without having to kick off the process over and over again on the user's computer that has the scheduled task on it. Another is that all the dialog boxes and errors and anything that SimpleIndex would pop up, whether it be an error or a message to say yes or no, is automatically suppressed. Also, all errors are logged to the Windows application log, which is extremely easy to check and monitor. The processing also runs faster when the application is hidden as a service. And then finally, services can also be started and stopped remotely without having to connect to the computer directly. Now, I do have a sample configuration set up for SimpleIndex to run as a service. So let's open that and take a look. It's saved to the desktop. And this particular configuration is a configuration that's set up to read barcodes from my sample images that are in the input folder. And it's just going to read this barcode and automatically save it. Now, the configurations to run automatically as a service or any automatic configurations require two things. One, that the configuration have all automatic fields such as barcode, OCR, auto number, things like that. And that pre-index batch be checked, which automatically saves the images with the index values that are read. Now this configuration will save to the output folder, which is currently empty. And it'll also save a log. Let's delete these out of there so we can see that it generates that as well. So for now, I'm going to minimize this and open the output folder. Now there's two different ways to open the services with the Windows services for SimpleIndex as the SimpleIndex Service Control Manager. We have our own interface for that, so you don't have to worry about going into the Windows services to set this up if you don't want to. One way is to go to the Start menu and then find the SimpleIndex folder in your All Programs. And then under Tools, you select Configure SimpleIndex Service, and that opens the window up. Of course, you can make this whatever size you want. The other method is to open SimpleIndex directly. Go into the File menu, select Schedule Job, and then press Configure Service Options. Both take you to the same place. The first thing that's needed to run SimpleIndex as a Windows service is to install the SimpleIndex as a Windows service. You can either pick System or user as the type to install as. If you install as a system, it's recommended that all the files and folders be local to the computer that you're currently on. And then it uses the systems account for the login. If you want to use folders and files that are in network locations that aren't on the computer that it's running on, you want to pick user. When you install as a system, the only question that you're asked is whether you want the service to start manually by going into the Windows services or into the SimpleIndex Service Control and Options and kicking it off manually, or automatic when Windows reboots. Generally, automatic is preferred, as you don't have to worry about starting off the service. Once that's installed, it says service installed, and you can move on to the next step. Let's go ahead and uninstall this so we can install as a user as well. As a user, you have an additional question past how you want the service to start up, which is what the username and password is for the administrator on the network, on the domain that you're on. So what you need to do to install this is type in the domain name / administrator name, and in this case it's administrator, and then type in the administrator password. And then of course you have to confirm the password. And then you have the service installed as a user instead of as a system. Now, when you have user as the service, then you want to use UNC paths for the network drives. That way it knows directly where the location is instead of using any paths that you have set up otherwise. Since everything is on this computer, I'm going to install as a system instead. Now, as you saw, I was clicking this button to remove the service and uninstall it. Anytime you want to uninstall the service from the Windows services, you just click this button and it automatically uninstalls. You can also get directly to the Windows Service Manager with this button, and it takes you right into the Windows services. That way you don't have to go through the standard Windows directories to get there. You can also set it up to run as a web service, and what you do there is you click this icon and you type in the URL to the web service that you'd like to connect to, and then set up how many seconds you want it to pull that web address. The next step is to pick a configuration that you would like to have run as a service. To do that, you click the Add Job button, which pulls up a navigator in Windows so you can find the configuration that you'd like to add to the list. In this particular case, it's on the desktop, and I can select it and click Open. Now you see it shows up in the Job Configuration Files list, so you know exactly where the job that's running is located. If you'd like to remove a particular configuration, you can select it and click Remove, and it'll take it off the list, but it will not delete the configuration. Now you can add as many configurations to the list as you want, and they'll all show up here. The next step is setting up the time interval that you want the configuration to run at. So to do that, you select your configuration, and then you come over to the right to set your time interval. You can either have it set up to run as a timed interval or scheduled to run at a time. For the time interval, you set the numeric value that you want it to run at, and then the unit of measure, whether minutes or hours. You can also set up a time to run, and with that, it'll kick off at the time that you have designated and on the date that you have designated, and it'll run based on the frequency. So you can have it run hourly or daily. Monday through Friday is daily without the weekends. You can have it also run once per week with weekly, or once per month with monthly. You can also set the job timeout. So if there's a large job that's much too large for SimpleIndex to process, you can set up the job timeout to automatically stop the job if it hits this minute time. For the demo, we'll set it to check for new files every 1 minute. Now, if you make any changes to a configuration, you must hit Save Changes. So since we've changed the minutes from 5 to 1, we need to hit Save Changes so it saves those changes to the job. And then, of course, it asks you if you want to restart the job, since any changes that are made have to be started on the beginning of the job. Now, there's also some administration tools that you can add to the job, which are email notifications and extended logging. Now, normally the logging occurs automatically in the application event log and only has events for errors. If you turn on the extended logging, it'll log all the different steps and processes that happen with the configuration that you have that turned on for. That way you can see everything that happened. The email notifications are a way to send an email notification to a specific user, say your IT admin, when there's an error that occurs. That way they can check it and know automatically when the error has happened. So to set that up, you turn on the email notifications, you point it to the server, the SMTP server that you want to use. You can set the port. You can also use SSL if you'd like. And then you set up the username and password for the server that you want to connect to. Finally, you set up the email address that you want to send it to and who you want it to come from, as well as the subject for the email. Then once you have that in there, anytime there's an error, the email address that you put in the to field will automatically receive an error message via email. Finally, you can set up some command line arguments to kick off different processes from the command line. Some of the things that you'd want to do from the command line are to modify configuration parameters, such as the detailed logging, the preset index values, or to override certain job settings. And of course, with the administration and the command line arguments, you still need to hit Save Changes if you want to save the changes for what you've configured for the configuration. Now, once you've set up all the settings for a particular job, you want to start the service. To start the service, you come up to the Start Stop section and you click the play button, and that kicks off the service for all the configurations that are in the job configuration files list. So now that the service is started, we can see that the status for this particular configuration is set to scheduled, and the step is now set to complete, which complete means that this job is done and not running. So we'll need to wait a minute since we have it set to run on a time interval at 1 minute. So we can wait for it to run. In the meantime, we can see that in the output folder, there are no current files. So when this runs and recognizes, it'll save the images to the output folder, and you'll be able to tell what images are there. It'll also save the logs to the log folder. Now, if you want to pause a specific configuration without stopping all the configuration services, then you select the configuration that you'd like and you click Pause. When you want to start that configuration again, you click Restart and it'll start that configuration. As we see now, the configuration that we've set up is currently running. And the step is processing, which means that it's actually processing the barcodes that it's recognizing. We also see some additional fields over here, which are last batch and last run, as well as PID. So let me go through which each of these are. The step is which part of the configuration is currently running. Now there's several different options for that. Let's look at status first. The different statuses are scheduled, which means that the configuration file was just added and it's waiting to start for the first time. Then there's pending, which is like scheduled, only it's waiting to run again after it's processed for the first time. There's paused, which means it's not running and it's waiting to be started. And then there's running, which means that it's currently running, and stop, which means that the SimpleIndex service is stopped, but the configuration is still running and completing the current batch that it was on. The step, there's different options for that as well, which are the startup, which means that the configuration is starting. There's pre-process for any pre-process command line settings that you have. There's import, which means it's pulling in the images that need to be processed. There's processing, which means that it's processing those images with the automatic index fields. Export, which means that it's saving the images out to the output folder. Imprint, which is part of the configuration where you can imprint certain information on the page. Post-process, which is any post-processing command lines that you have set. And complete, which means that it's not running any longer. So since this is complete and it's run for one time, we can see in the output folder that the images are now saved. And we can also see in the log that the logs are created. The logs are a good way to check what's been run and how long it's been run. And that's gone over in a different video. You also see that last batch is set. It uses the batch ID, which is a SimpleIndex default, and it's the date at the time of the last batch that was run. So if we go to the batch log and take a look, we see that each batch has a batch ID. This configuration's already run 3 times since we started it. And we see that the batch ID is set for each one, which corresponds to the last batch ID here. The last runtime is the last time that SimpleIndex was opened from scratch. When you have very short timed intervals, it leaves SimpleIndex running. That way it doesn't have to close and open SimpleIndex repeatedly. So that way you can tell the last time that SimpleIndex was actually kicked off from scratch. The PID is the processing ID. That allows you to find a particular process in the Windows Task Manager under the services. That corresponds to this field here. So you see all the processing IDs. That allows you to easily find where the process is that's running for this particular configuration. That way, if you have a long list of different configurations that are running in at any time, you can easily find it in the list. If you want to stop all the jobs that are currently running, then the best way to do that is clicking the Start Stop button. So once you hit stop, it'll stop all the configurations that are currently in the list. And then if you want to start them again, you hit the play button, and then the service starts again. That's the end of the SimpleSoftware Training University video number 303, Automatic Processing with a Windows Service. We've seen how to configure SimpleIndex to run automatic job configurations as a Windows service on certain schedules and time frames, as well as how to log errors with notifications and to monitor the progress of each job configuration.